Hello and welcome back. This is Fuzzee Tutorials and my name is Dave. Today's topic is how to construct a 3D overlay effect highlighting a central point of an existing image. We will be doing two versions of this tutorial. This one is in Graphic 3.1 by Picta, and this is only available on the Mac or on iOS. The other version will be how to do this in the Bitmap graphic editor called the GIMP 2.10. I will provide a link to that version of the tutorial below. If you find this content useful, hit that like button. If you want to see more Fuzzee tutorials, please subscribe. If you want to know when new tutorials come out, please click that notification bell. Okay, let's get started. Alright, so I've already made a new file, and to do that you would just go into File and then New and pick a blank file, and you want to use either 1280 by 720, which is 720p, or you want to use 1920 by 1080, which is 1080p. For this tutorial, I'm assuming you already have some things prepared, including an installation of Graphic by Picta 3.1 or higher, and a suitable image to use for this project. So now I've already made an image that matches the size, so it's also at 720p. So we'll just go over and drag this in, and we'll drag it in place. Once it gets close to the edges of the page, it'll snap into place. Now I'm going to make a new layer, and we're going to call this Light Rays. Okay, so the easiest way to get started when you're working with a vector graphics program is we're just going to start with a rectangle, and actually I want to have a little more room to work with here, so I'm going to use a keyboard shortcut of Command 0, which will size it a little more appropriately, and then we're just going to go over here and we're going to draw a rectangle. And then we hit our selector tool, and now if we go over to the corner, if you're right on the corner you'll get the option to resize it, but if you move it out a little bit you get the option to rotate it. So we're going to rotate this to make it a proper angled light ray, and then we're going to drag it down into position a little better. Now it's okay if we have stuff hanging over the edge, because when we actually export this to a JPEG or a PNG, depending on what you want to do, it's only going to export the size of the canvas. Anything that sticks out beyond that will get cut off. So now this isn't a very convincing looking ray, so we need to add some perspective. So what I'm going to do is go over here to our path selection tool. So I'm going to go over, grab this little point here, and I'm going to drag it down, and then I'm going to grab this point and I'm going to drag it up, and now this gives us our perspective. Now let's give it a little more. Alright, so we'll go back to our selector tool, and we're going to bring this right in here like so. Now I want to point out a kind of a cool feature. We can actually go in and we're going to zoom in a bit so we get a little closer view here. And you'll see because the microphone is curved and that light ray is straight. Okay, so we want to match the curve of the microphone to make it look like the light ray is actually going in behind it. So we're going to go over here to our convert tool, and then we're going to convert this point and then we can pull out these Bezier curve handles. And we want to make it straight so that that side of the ray stays straight. And then we'll go over here and click on Make Compound Path. And that will allow us to make it back into a corner, and we can actually curve it in. And the further you pull it, the more it moves where that curve is going to be, and moving it this way changes the curve. So we just play with this until we actually match our curve. And then we go back to our selection tool, and if we hold our shift key down and click the other point, then we can actually drag this down until it's right on the microphone. Alright, now we're going to zoom back out with the Command 0, and we're going to get rid of our Properties Inspector, and we're going to go back to our Appearance Inspector, and we're going to pick our Special Effects section here. Now I just need to make some more room to work, so I'm going to drag this Layers panel down a bit, make some room. Now we're going to open up the fill, and I'm going to change this type from color to linear gradient. Okay, so now we're going to go in here and we're going to change this color, and we're going to drop it down. Well, we don't want to drop it down too far. We're going to, let's say, drop them down to about 180 each. Now in the RGB color world, when you match the numbers, you get a shade of gray. Okay, and now we're going to adjust our alpha, or our opacity, and we're going to drop this down to about 40%. And then we'll click back over here, and we're going to do the same on this little inkwell here. And we want this a little brighter color, so we're going to go to 220 on each. Now you also have the option, if you want to, show you in just a second here, we can actually go in and type the number in directly. We just double click the little box, and then I can type it in, hit enter. And we'll adjust the opacity here. And we want to make this a little bit lighter, so we're going to drop that down to about 30. Or whatever tickles your fancy, whatever you think looks best. It's your drawing, so you got to do what makes you happy. Now, we're going to add an interesting little subtlety to this effect. If I go anywhere in the middle here and I click right on the edge, it'll create another inkwell. And I'll do the same over here. And the color that it makes that inkwell is going to be, it's going to match what the color would be right at that point. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and click on that outside one again, and I'm going to lower the opacity even more. And that kind of gives a subtle shift and makes it look even more realistic. We'll just click there to get out of that, and we're going to do the same on this end. We're going to reduce it down a little bit more to say 15. Alright. Now as I'm looking at that on top of the bright background, it's actually not looking dark enough, so we're just going to go back in here and we're just going to make it a little more opaque. Let's bring it up to say 50 and see how that looks. And we'll do the same here. Except we might make it a little bit brighter, say about 60. Alright, now we'll click out here to deselect. And you know, I think we might have to go back and adjust these just a little bit more here. So we'll move this back up to say 30. And we'll do the same here. We'll match this one. Alright. Okay, now if you notice up on this end we're kind of not sitting right anymore, and it looks a little bit funny, so we're just going to go in with our zoom tool, select that area, go back to our selector, and now we need our point tool, and we can actually go and adjust this right to the line, and we can do the same here. Alright, and we'll zoom back out with our Command 0, and I think that actually looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it, and to do that I just go Command D, or if you want you can go up to the edit menu and pick duplicate from the menu. And we're going to move it down a little bit, and then we're going to rotate it. Okay. Now you'll notice as I'm doing this that there's some orange lines that are appearing. Now what those are is snap guides, and it's trying to automatically align it to another object that's close to the same horizontal position. And this can be a very handy tool. Now in this case it's not really the appropriate spot, so we'll just move it back over a little more. And if we're happy with the direction of that ray, we can go and make some point adjustments to align it to the microphone, but I'm going to actually give it a little more angle here. Yeah, that looks better. And now we're just going to slide it over a bit. And I'm going to go back to my point tool. And you notice that line turns orange again when I get it to the edge of the page. Or actually, technically, it's aligning it to the underlying graphic, not the page. And now, to do this, we're going to need to zoom in a little bit. And we'll go back to our path tool. And we'll adjust this. And now we want to take this and bring it back straight again to match the edge of the microphone. And we got a little bit of a curve here that we don't. Oh. So we've got to click on our little handle tool here and then make a compound path. And now we can make that straight again. Alright. And we'll zoom back out. Now I could just say at this point, you know, rinse and repeat until you're done all your rays, but there's something else that I want to show you here. So we're going to take this one and duplicate it. And now you see what happened here when I duplicated it is it remembered how much we moved the last one and how much angle change we did, and it duplicated that as well. It's a very handy feature. So now we're going to pull that in, bring it down a little bit so that it clears the bottom of that bright spot. Now, you'll notice that when this is on that dark background, it makes this light ray look a lot more intense than the other ones. So we need to tone it down a bit, otherwise it doesn't look right. So we'll get rid of that panel. Now we're go back to our gradients here, and we're going to turn these down. Now the nice thing is when you're adjusting this, it shows you live how it's going to look. You don't have to click out of this to see the difference it's going to make. So we're going to drop this down to about 20%, and we'll go back and do the same over here. We'll drop it to about I think that looks pretty good there. Alright, and then we need to align our nodes here. And we better just zoom in and make sure that it's right. Alright. So now we got to, oh, see, it's the one little bug with this program, which is something I wish they'd fix. So we've got to go back to our Bezier tool here, and then we can straighten this corner back out and get rid of this curve. And actually we need to pull this, oh sorry, we need to go over here and we need to pull this in closer. If we look at the fine detail, we see that there's actually, the microphone jogs in a bit here. Right, we're going to zoom back out and we'll deselect. So now at this point you can just kind of rinse and repeat until you get all the rays in place in the way you want them. And rather than take you through all of that, I'm going to go over to one that I've already done the work on. And we're going to go in here, and you see these little eyes over on the right. That's how we make layers invisible. So I just turn that back on, and now we've got our rays. Now you notice that this one doesn't go all the way to the microphone. And the reason for that is I've got stuff that we're going to overlay over top of this that's going to hide that. But if having that gap bothers you, it's easy enough to fix it. Okay, so now I'm going to use one of my demo layers here just to show you a couple things. So we need to add kind of our light ray highlights. So we're going to use a little different tool here because I want to show you kind of a variety. We're going to use our star tool, and now up here we can set the points anywhere from 3 up to 24. So actually you can do it as 2 as well, but we want 3 to give us a triangle. And then we're just going to draw a triangle. Now it draws a perfect one from the center out. That's fine. Now we'll go over to our path tool here, and we can Actually, if we select this middle one, we can just hit the delete key and get rid of it. Same thing goes for this one. We can get rid of that, and we'll get rid of that. Now we'll grab this and we'll pull it down and put it right where we want it. And do the same for this one. Bring that over here. And actually, I think I'm going to make this a little bit longer. Okay, now we'll go back to our selector tool. And now we're going to change these colors. But first we're going to change our opacity back up to about 80% here. And then we're going to make this bright white. Oh, I see the problem. We've got to take this layer and move it above the actual light rays. So all you have to do is go over here and just grab the layer and drag it up until the little blue line goes above it. And now if we pop this little arrow open, we'll see that the shape is here, and we can, oh, we've got to unhide that layer. Okay, so now we can go into this one, and we're going to set this at about 80%. We're going to make this bright white. And now I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to actually drop this down to basically nothing. And we're going to do the same here. We're going to bring this up to 80%, make it bright white. And then I'm going to go and adjust this one back down to 0. Now the reason I'm doing this is it gives our light rays a little bit more natural of a look, or sorry, our light ray highlights. And now we can actually take these and drag them, and if you notice how it's changing where that kind of border is there. So we'll just play with it a little bit until we get it just where we want it. And we'll do the same thing at the other end. Alright, now we'll deselect and see what it looks like. And I think that's giving us the effect that we're looking for. Alright, so now we can select this one again. And I'm going to duplicate it. And we're going to zoom in so we can see what we're doing here. Back to my selector tool, and now we're going to take this and we're going to line up those two corners, and then I'm going to grab my node tool, and I'm going to come back here and I'm going to shorten this a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to change this point a bit. And that little orange line that appeared, that was just telling me that I've got it perfectly straight up and down. And we're just going to move that a little bit. Okay, so now go back to our selector tool, and we'll go back into our gradients, and we're going to change these colors to black. So we're just going to make these all 0. And enter. Okay. And we're going to take this one And we're going to make it all black. This time we'll use the sliders. Okay, and now I'm going to change my threshold area here, tighten it up a bit. And we're going to make this one all black. And we're going to tighten that threshold up. Alright, now we're going to go back to our little point tool or node tool, and we're just going to narrow this and highlight shadow up a bit. And I'm actually going to give it a little bit more of a bevel. Alright, let's zoom out. Deselect. And there we go. So now we can use that technique and we can duplicate or we can copy paste. And if you do the copy paste, then it's not going to duplicate how far you moved it and any other changes that you made. So in this case, a copy paste is probably a better way to go. And then once again, we're just going to rinse and repeat. Now let me turn that off. And I'm going to enable all the highlights that I created. So you can see how that looks. So now I'm going to take that demo layer and I'm just going to go down here and hit the minus key to delete it. Same thing with our demo highlights. We'll delete that. Now I'm going to go and select that main highlight one and we're going to add another layer. And we're just, now if we just double click there, we can name it. So we'll just call this a demo icon. Okay, so what I'm going to show you how to do is to make this little guy right here. Okay, so we're going to go over to our Ellipse Tool. And we start in the upper left corner here. And I'll start to draw it. Now you notice, it's just like a normal ellipse tool. But if I hold my shift key down, it forces it to a perfect circle. So we're just going to make that a little bigger. And we're going to change it back from a gradient, for our linear gradient, and we're going to make it a radial gradient. And then we're going to change these colors here. We're going to make that outside one kind of an orange color. And in this case, we don't want any transparency, so we're going to set our opacity or alpha to 100%. And then we're going to take this one and we're going to change it to our bright yellow color and 100%. And we're going to do the same on that one. We're going to make that our bright yellow and 100%. And we're going to set that to our orange color here. Alright, now we need to grab these inner inkwells and drag them in a bit. Oh, sorry, looks like Yeah, I forgot about radial works a little different on this one than the other program I was just demoing. So we're actually going to, we're just going to take this one and drag it right over top of it, and then that'll essentially get rid of it. And then we're going to move this to get it just the way we want it. And if we want a little bit more of a kind of a gentle rounded effect, we'll just go add another one in here. And then we can move that to where we want it. And we'll just adjust these until we get the effect that we're looking for. Alright, so we're going to close that fill section. Now you have to decide whether you want an outline or a stroke. So you might decide that you want an outline, so you can set that outline to what you want, or you can just uncheck it, turn it right off. Go over here to selector tool, deselect, so you can see the difference. Turn that back on. So it's really a personal preference thing. But I think it looks better as just a one-point outline. All right. So now we can select our ellipse tool again. And we're going to make a couple of eyes. So once again, we'll get it started and then hold our shift key down. And we'll get our eye the size we want it. Now you could get fancy and use the radial fill and make a kind of a fancy eyeball, but we're just going to change it back to a flat color. And then we'll make that color black. But I mean, it's your picture, so you got to do what makes you happy. So now we're just going to duplicate this, so we'll use our Command D, and then we'll drag it over, and you notice those, you get those lines that appear, and when you get all three lines, it means it's perfectly lined up with the other eye. Makes life so much easier. Now you'll notice if we take a look back at the other icon, you can see I've got a kind of a thin lopsided smile. But if we wanted to recreate the type of smile I made in the GIMP tutorial of this, we can do that as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And we basically do it the same way. We go in here and we make our ellipse. And because it keeps it as a separate object, it handles it a little differently. So we're going to make another circle. We're going to kind of do like we did before, and we're just going to kind of overlap it. And then I'm going to go in here and use the shift key, click on the other one, so we've got both selected. And then we're going to go over to we're going to turn our appearance inspector off, and we're going to go to our properties inspector. That one, it subtracts the one from the other, and we get that same type of a design. Now to make the other thinner mouth, you can do that really easy just by using the arc tool. And we can come in here and we can make our arc, and then we can use this Bezier curve tool, and we can come in and Just move these around until we get the shape that we're after. And we'll go to our node tool so we can move this out a bit. And then we can go to our selector tool and we'll bring our appearance inspector back up. And then we'll turn off fill and we'll open up stroke. And then we can change the thickness. And if we don't like the way it's facing, we can actually go back over here and bring up our alignment tool, and then we can flip it horizontally. Now that was a subtle change, but if we did the same thing to this one, it'll be a little more obvious. And you can do it vertically. But we're going to go and get rid of that one. I actually kind of like that. And if we want to make it a little more tilted, we can just use our rotation tool. And we can move it around to where we want it. And honestly, this is much easier to do this work in a vector editing program as opposed to a bitmap editor like the GIMP. You can still get the same job done. It's just a whole lot easier if you're doing it with vector graphics. Alright, so I'm going to bring back up our appearance inspector. And we can actually take this icon layer and get rid of it. And then we've got some text that we put in, and you notice that that's what hides that gap on that one light ray. But we'll just get rid of that again, and I'll show you how to do those fancy text effects. So we'll just make another temporary layer here. And we'll go over and grab some text, our text tool, and then we just put this where we want it, and we click, and then we can type in the character we want. So last time you saw it was exclamation points, so this time let's do a question mark. And then we'll go over here to our selector tool again, and then we'll come up here and we'll click the letter T for text, and we can change this to a different font. So let's go with this one. That makes a neat looking question mark. And then we go here and we can change the size if we want to make it really big, or that's right, I made it smaller, but if we want to make it really big. Now what happened there, the reason it disappeared is because the text box is now too small to contain it. So we just resize it until it reappears. Alright, we can go back over to our special effects tab here. And now we can just change the main text color. But we don't actually have to use that. We can actually go here, turn on fill, and then we have the same capabilities as we had with the other one, where we can go and select a linear gradient, a pattern. You could even do an image if you wanted to make, say, a flaming text. You could drop an image into it, but that's for, I've actually got instructions on how to do that in another tutorial, so we're just going to go with the linear gradient. Now if we want it going from the top to the bottom rather than left to right. We can change the angle, but I'll show you one other thing here real quick. You can change it, basically you can swap it from left to right just by hitting this little button here. But what we're going to do is we're going to change the angle to 90 degrees. And you'll notice if we go back and take a quick look at that other layer, you can see that I've got a nice gradient in the top part of it and then a solid color in the bottom. So I'll show you how to do that here. So we're going to open this up here again, and let's get a good starting color. Oh. So we'll start with that. And I actually want this opposite, so we're just going to swap it. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click to add another one here, and now we're going to make this a red, and we'll bring it down a bit until we get kind of the gradient effect that we're looking for in the top half, and we'll just ignore what's going on in the bottom. It doesn't really matter at the moment, but we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, so now we'll go here and we'll just add another one right next to it, and then we can pull it up, and we'll add another one right here, and then we just adjust these until we get the separation right where we want it. And voila, we'll just get that to a perfect black. Okay, and that's how you do that. And if you want to add an outline to it, like I showed on the other one, we can just turn on stroke, and then we can make that whatever color we want. Let's say yellow, and we'll open that up, and we can change our width. Now you've got some other choices here too. You notice that when at position it says center, but we can change that to be inside, and you see the difference that makes. Or we can go outside. So it makes kind of a subtle or not so subtle difference. Now it normally defaults to center. And if you want to get really fancy, we've got some other options. And we can add a drop shadow. And then we can change the blurriness of it, which is done with size. So I want to make it bigger. It'll make it more blurry. Or we can sharpen it right up, like so. It's just all whatever taste works for you. Now, something that not a lot of people know, even ones that use this program a lot, is we can actually go in here and we can add another special effect layer. Say we wanted to add another drop shadow just for kicks and giggles. So we can actually go down here and we can tell it to add another drop shadow. And we can open that up. And we could make it negative numbers to go the other way. Now this isn't something that you would probably normally do, but it's just an example to show you what's possible. So we'll just turn that back off. Now a place that a person might actually want to use that is, let's say we want to add another stroke option. So then we can open this up and we can change this to outside. And then we could widen that up a bit. So you can get into some really complex effects using these vector editing packages, especially one like this one. This one is so simple to use and is so powerful. And then if we want more of those, we just select it and we can duplicate it. And we can grab another one and see how by using the duplicate function it did the same distance and same change in position. Although in this case we're going to bring it down here and we can actually take this one and rotate it. Put it in like so. So there we go, folks. Now we've made a pretty good light ray package, and it was a lot easier and a lot more features than doing it in the GIMP. Now I'm not saying you couldn't duplicate this in the GIMP, but it's a much more difficult process to do and a lot more time consuming. Okay, so now actually I'm just going to save this. So Command S, and then we're going to export. And now if you're doing this for YouTube, which is likely what you're doing, you're going to want to use JPEG. I mean, YouTube will accept a PNG, but Facebook's got a bit of a quirk. If you make your thumbnail a PNG, it will strip out the thumbnail when it previews the link that you post. So you need to stick with using JPEG. And now normally the quality is going to default to 85, but because YouTube is always going to compress a JPEG, you know, it's going to recompress it again when you add it, you want to bring it up to 99 so that when it does compress it, it's still going to leave it looking like a nice clean picture. And we'll save that. And I just have to make it a little different from the other one. And there you have it, folks. And that's it for this tutorial. If you find this content useful, hit that like button. If you want to see more Fuzzee D tutorials, please subscribe. If you want to know when new tutorials come out, please click that notification bell. Thanks for coming. We'll see you next time.